Welcome back to Roots and Relevance. We are finishing up the Scroll of Esther this morning. You'll notice our friend Jonathan Benson is not in, so I will be playing the role of heretic today.
You will fall short.
I'm sure I will.
Love you, John. I'm just kidding.
It's a lot to live up to. This is, we kind of mentioned this last week, of one of the questions people have is why even have Esther 9 and 10 when it looks like everything else is done? So we can talk about that a little bit, but especially as it comes to the Israelites or to the Jewish people and sort of the ruthlessness that we're going to see in this chapter, or it looks appearing like it's ruthlessness. And I was just saying to you guys before we started that the word genocide is actually back in the news again, at least really across the world and even in our country, as we've heard some people say that what Israel is doing right now in defense of Hamas and trying to protect themselves is they now have a group of people in Gaza that allegedly they've been cutting off humanitarian aid to as a way to defeat them more. And the problem with that, obviously, is that that looks a lot like genocide if you're cutting off aid and sort of keeping people locked up. And I guess one of the questions I have, found an article that's very recent that says American evangelicals remain among the strongest supporters of the nation of Israel. Among pastors, 80% say Christians need to support Israel. And they also found evangelicals see a close tie between God and Israel. 7 in 10 say the modern nation of Israel was formed as a result of biblical prophecy. In a similar number, 70% say God has a special relationship with the modern nation of Israel. And nearly 3/4 of evangelicals say events in Israel are a part of the prophecies in the book of Revelation. And if you believe that, hang on for when we do our series on the book of Revelation. So I guess my question is, for a long time, evangelicals, and this is, I know, reductionistic and not true of all evangelicals, but as a whole, we've sort of given Israel, the nation, a pass on just about anything. I remember when my son Ian was like 4 or 5, he had the personality of like, all right, Dad, who are the good guys and who are the bad guys, right? This is before Marvel blurred it all, you know? And I feel like that's kind of the way that we've approached Israel as evangelicals in the past is Israel, they are the good guys. And if we support them, we're good. Like, respond to that.
Well, I think there's an important difference between nation and state that I think our modern idea of like the nation state has kind of blurred a lot for people. State implies the government. What are the decisions the government specifically is making as a whole? Nation is the people, is their shared culture, history, language, which there is an Israeli nation, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's the same thing as the Israeli state. So while we can support the idea of the people groups, you know, and being allowed to exist in the world and to flourish, we can still disagree with the decisions of the state in general. Like, we shouldn't be denying humanitarian aid. Like, we can disagree with the state.
Would you go, Riley, as far as to say then that the state is secular then?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, it is the secular machination and what the world sees as Israel. The actual government, the borders, who has sovereignty over that land, that is the state. The people that make up the inhabitants of the state, that is the nation, and that's different.
Totally. And I would say, here's the thing that's crazy. Even if that wasn't true, let's say it was, like the secular state of Israel is the nation of Israel, which I agree with you, it's not. Mm-hmm. But even if it was, to say that somehow now we can't critique Israel is to ignore like half the Bible, where like God is constantly going, okay, I have this against you. I have, you know, constantly, you know, getting on to them about justice. And so that wouldn't even make sense. But as you say, we're even a step beyond that. We're talking about a secular state. Wally, any thoughts on that?
Well, I mean, just growing up in the church, we always understood that the Israelites, the Jews, are God's chosen people.
Right.
And whether, you know, what does that look like? How does that play out? Did God choose the Israelites through which, you know, he's going to be doing something among this people? Yes. Is there a unique relationship that God has with the Israelites? Absolutely. Is there a unique relationship that God has chosen to, you know, he gave them his covenantal name? He has this unique relationship, and he formed through Abraham, blessing those who bless you and cursing those who curse you. And I think,
And we've taken that verse to an extreme, right?
yes,
Like there's a good way to take that, and then
there's a very wrong way to
Yeah.
take that, where you just, whatever the Jewish people choose to do is correct. I mean, there's nothing wrong with it,
right.
And they'll go back into Joshua. Well, look what they did to Jericho. Look what they did to all these people coming into the land. They destroyed Harim, this holy war, destroyed women, children, animals, and everything like that. Some people will look back into the history of the Jewish conquest of Israel back with Joshua and use that as justification for, well, see what God allowed them to do. God told them to do these things.
And that's scary theology once you get there, because then who's to say you can't do that today? In fact, we see that happening of like, hey,
Work for Hitler.
yeah, like God said, like if God tells you to do something, who are you to argue with God? I think when Christians have given a pass, and this, like the present situation is a great example where it's pretty clear that no matter what Netanyahu has said, when he said famously last week, there is no starvation in Gaza, when it's like, hey, like we can believe our own eyes. Like when the reports are coming out, when organizations are going in and coming out saying this many people have died, and you're seeing the pictures, like you can tell us all you want, that's the case, but like we see it as Christians, and just, I think as people of integrity in general, we need to stand up and say like, that is not, that is not right.
And we as Christians have been engrafted in. We're the wild vine, and it says in Romans chapter 13, 14?
I don't know.
I can't remember.
Romans.
We're the wild vine that's been engrafted into the root, into the Jewish. So all the promises that God has given to Abraham are ours because of his faithfulness to the Jewish Israelite people. And so all those promises that are going to come to fruition in the person and work of Jesus Christ are ours because of being engrafted into the promises God made to Abraham.
Totally.
And so there is a unique relationship that God has with the Jewish people, but it was formed for the idea of sending a redeemer that's going to redeeming not just the nation state of Israel, but the people, and not just the people of Israel, but the world.
So we shouldn't just keep giving money no matter what they do, and supporting them no matter what, is what you're saying. That it's not, if like the whole, I will bless, bless those who bless Israel.
Call them out when they do wrong,
Right. Call balls and strikes.
That's right.
Yeah.
I mean, don't hold back.
And,
Justify their actions by saying, oh, that's appropriate. They have every right to be able to do that. Yes. Do they have the right to defend themselves, or do they have the right to take out a threat? Absolutely. But that should come with limits too, right?
Totally. And, even things like obeying Geneva Convention rules.
So to say there are actually rules for how to conduct
there
a
are
war.
some rules of war. Exactly. And there are still things like war crimes. And if some of the things are true that they're saying, there might actually be war crimes involved here. I sometimes pick on evangelicals, but I want to call them out when they do right. Because I also think I've noticed a change, especially in the last month or two, where I'm hearing a lot more Christians step up and say, actually, this is not right at all. And they're doing good things as well. An article came out a couple days ago from Baptist Press that you'll love this. It was talking about in Gaza, a love offering from a Baptist church in Gaza proclaims the sign as Christian mission to Gaza serves hot meals to both Christians and Muslims in the Gaza Strip, where people are starving to death. They've served about 2,000 hot meals over the weekend, literally this past weekend, July 24th through the 26th, in the name of Gaza Baptist, said Hannah Masad, who served as the church's first Palestinian pastor before founding it. And so they're continuing to make these hot meals, and I love it because it's not like this Baptist church in Gaza is going, all right, Christians come here. They're putting it out there, and they're feeding people, which to me,
They're loving their neighbor and their community like we were told to do.
Exactly.
Bless them and pray for influence and impact for
Absolutely.
them. Yeah,
So,
that's fantastic.
so there are some good things. The reason I bring that up is because some of the response from Israel, their reaction has been, look, we're not genociding like anybody in Gaza. All we're doing is actually defending ourselves from genocide, which, interestingly enough, that comes into play a lot in this chapter, as we're going to talk about violence and justifiable violence and the right to defend oneself when there's a potential genocide coming. And that's all going to come up here. as well. So with that, we're going to dive in. There's a bit to get into this morning because we're going to do all of chapter 9 and chapter 10, which is literally just 3 verses. So I'm going to read the first 10 verses and then I'm going to read the first 9 verses. So here we go. The king's command and law went into effect on the 13th day of the 12th month, the month Adar. On the day when the Jews' enemies had hoped to overpower them, just the opposite happened. The Jews overpowered those who hated them. In each of King Ahasuerus' provinces, the Jews assembled in their cities to attack those who intended to harm them. Not a single person could withstand them. Fear of them fell on every nationality. All the officials of the provinces, the satraps, the governors, and the royal civil administrators aided the Jews because they feared Mordecai. For Mordecai exercised great power in the palace, and his fame spread throughout the provinces as he became more and more powerful. The Jews put all their enemies to the sword, killing and destroying them. They did what they pleased to those who hated them. In the fortress of Susa, the Jews killed and destroyed 500 men, including Parshandatha. By the way, verse 7 is all about confidence. So I'm pronouncing these exactly correctly. And if you hear a different name somewhere else,
Say it fast.
they're
and
wrong.
With authority.
Exactly. Including Parshandatha, Dalphon, Aspatha, Paratha, Adalia, Eridatha, Parmashta, Arisai.
Nailed it.
And I will finish out with 10. They killed these 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. However, they did not seize any plunder. All right. The reversal has continued, and maybe this is kind of the culmination of this big reversal. So what stands out to you in those first 10 verses?
I like how in like the very first verse, it's like, and this was the plan, but then it didn't happen. And I just love how the author decided to write that.
Oh, yeah. How does your translation say it? Mine says just the opposite happened. I know
The NASB says it was turned to the contrary.
The ESV says the reverse occurred.
Yeah, which is fun. I read that one too, and I was like, that's literally, how much have we been talking about this whole series?
Yep.
And it literally just says it. It's like, okay, in case anybody's not getting this whole reversal theme, I'm going to just say it explicitly for you right here, whether it's the opposite or what was yours, the contrary or the reversal. It literally says it. And yeah, I love that too.
Well, I know we had a discussion either last week or 2 weeks ago about how much the official of the provinces or of these areas that the officials would be involved in either protecting or attacking the Jews.
You're talking about the people in verse 3, the officials, province,
Yes,
satraps,
yeah.
governors. Okay.
Because in chapter 8, we have the edict was written according to all, verse number 9, the edict was written according to all that Mordecai commanded concerning the Jews to the satraps, the governors, and the officials of the provinces from India to Ethiopia. So he's not just writing this to the Jews. I think Jonathan might have sort of alluded that this is just for the Jews. No, he's writing this edict to the satraps and governors. And then we see in verse 3, all the officials of the provinces and the satraps and the governors of the royal agents also helped the Jews, for the fear of Mordecai had fallen on them. And why did the fear of Mordecai fall on them?
Because, I mean, it's a political move. Mordecai's got all the power. He's got the king's ear. You don't want to hack off the guy that's second in command of the whole kingdom. So you're like, oh, I guess I'll protect your people.
So like
brutal culture. If you defy that, it's like, what's going to happen to me? You know, it's self-preservation.
So like Mordecai in chapter 8, after he writes his edict, he goes out in almost like a celebratory parade. You know, he's wearing the royal robes again that he's worn before that Haman put on him and drug him about the city. Here we have Mordecai being elevated. And when would you have a parade? All right. When would you have the parade, before or after your enemies are defeated?
You would think after,
right?
Like, in fact, that's like, especially in the New Testament, right? You see like the idea of the parade coming home from a victory. Like, I forgot, there's a triumphal, entry type thing where it's
2 Corinthians.
Yep.
So why is it that Mordecai has this parade in this very public demonstration of his power before the edict even reaches these provinces, right? He is trying to be preemptive. He's trying to be proactive in putting forth that the Jews are the favored people here in this situation, because you got these two edicts that coming to these satraps
Right.
and governors, right? Which one are you going to listen to? Which one's going to hold sway?
It's showing which side the empire is on, in
Yeah.
a sense. Like
Well-
you see a parade put on by the empire, and the empire is, there's blue and red team, and all you see is blue flags everywhere. You're like, okay, guess we're blue team,
But I would say, is the king taking sides here? Or is it just posing to see which side the government's landing on?
Well, we've seen the king pretty much be like, whatever, like, I don't care, just you can fix the problem, but I'll give you the authority to do that. So he's not really specifically endorsing a side. I mean, he's just being like,
He's a paper king.
go
But-
for it.
But publicly, you think he is, right?
Mhm.
Whether,
totally.
whether
Yeah.
in reality he's supporting the Jews or not, we know behind the scenes he's sort of apathetic.
He's not, this is not what the book is about at all, but it's clear he is not a good leader. Like he might use his power and his authority, but he's not leading people. And in that void, you have Mordecai and Esther, they're stepping into that void saying, okay, if you're not going to stand up, we're going to say what you should be saying for you. And like you said, Wally, nobody knows the difference.
That's right. They didn't know the difference. They just see Mordecai's being elevated in a public way here in royal robes. It must be the Jews. And so to hear them say in verse number 2 that the fear of the Jew, and no one could stand against them, for the fear of them had fallen on all peoples. And that's a hyperlink back to Joshua chapter 2, where the spies go into Jericho and Rahab reminds them, hey, the people are scared to death because they've heard all about you.
Well,
Right.
even if we're thinking Joshua, even the parade in general, like what do they do around Jericho for a week? They parade around the city. And so it's this idea of we've already won, get on the right side.
Right. That's a good point. Yeah. The victory parade preceded that as well.
Mhm.
In fact, that was almost the means in a sense of, all right, we're going to do this and God's going to use that in a supernatural way.
And then I think it's very interesting in verses 6 through 10, we see the sons of Haman being killed, right?
Yeah, let's kind of connect those two because verse 5 and verse 10, let's put on like a skeptic hat for a second and say, okay, I'm supposed to be reading this through the eyes of the Jewish people. And I'll read verse 5. The Jews put all their enemies to the sword, killing and destroying them. They did what they pleased to those who hated them. And then verse 10, they killed these 10 sons of Haman, son of Hammedatha, the enemy of the Jews. However, they did not seize any plunder. That's nice at the end, but beside that, it sounds pretty brutal. And like somebody might say, this does not seem like the Christian ethic, right? That, of Jesus, to love your enemies, to pray for them, to not repay evil with evil, but good for evil. So how do you respond to that?
Well, it's not like they were seeking their enemies out. If they were encountering any enemies, it's because they were actively coming after them that day. So it's not like it was some vindictive, like, we're going to go to your house, we're going to destroy you and your family, whatever. No, like, it was the people that came to them and were like, we're actually going to kill you. So it was a self-defense thing
In
in
fact,
a way.
the edict even said it that way, correct? Like,
Yeah.
you have like permission to defend yourselves against the people that are coming after you, not against everybody.
And even the sons of Haman, I mean, you can assume that they're probably out for revenge. Like their dads just died. And if they're sons of Haman, so they're sons of Agag, and they come from that line. So they also have the animosity for the Jewish people. And so it's
And they
poetic in a way.
Killed their dad.
Yeah. So like there's an idea that they would be the enemies of the Jews, continuing from their father. And then the idea that they died, that means the line of Haman's dead. That means the line, presumably, of Agag is dead. So it's God fulfilling his covenant that he made all the way back in Exodus. Like, we're going to destroy these people. The Agagites, like, they were bad news. They disrespected you. So I'm going to destroy them. And Saul didn't accomplish it. But we see here that it is being accomplished through the descendants of Saul and the tribe of Benjamin.
And that is that usually in the scene, there's like a group of people that are supposed to die. And something happens and either one or all of them don't die and they were supposed to. And so the rest of the movie is this like super campy horror of death coming after all the people that were supposed to die. And in this newest one, the bloodline one, same thing. The curse is supposed to follow everyone that should not have been alive. So in other words, like one person got out, for example, and they had kids. Well, death is like, well, they're kids. None of them should exist because that first person, should have died. And so the whole movie is about taking out like all the bloodlines so that the curse stops. And so I'm watching this and going, oh, that's what we have here is the reverse of the curse, which I think is what you were alluding to earlier, right? With 1 Samuel 15, that this is the full and complete, because the bloodline is now capped, is the completion of something that should have happened way back.
When was the command to defeat the Amalekites totally actually fulfilled? Here in Esther. So in
would you say verse 10 even?
Yeah,
like the culmination being
killing all the sons.
Yeah.
If there's a story in the Old Testament where Saul takes revenge on the Gibeonites. The Gibeonites were a people that were living in the land, the promised land, when the Israelites were coming into the land to claim it for their own after their freedom out of Egypt. And they tricked the Israelites to say that, hey, we've come from a far country, but actually living there because they didn't want to be destroyed like they've seen the Israelites destroy all these other people. So they made a pact with them. Joshua makes this pact with them that no harm will befall you. And anyway, we see later on Saul, where he should have taken out the Amalekites, he takes out the Gibeonites.
He does the opposite.
Right. He almost destroys the people of Gibeon. And so the Gibeonites, when David comes into power and regains his power, says, what can we do to rectify this situation? He goes, give us all the sons of Saul to kill.
Yep.
-1, right? Mephibosheth. We see a house being taken out by killing all the sons that could reproduce heirs that bear the name, right? We see the fulfillment of Exodus 17, 1 Samuel chapter 15, here in Esther chapter 9.
Totally. It's a total callback to say, like, now we're going to finish what should have been finished a long time ago.
And I think it's very interesting in the last part of verse 10, they 3 times in this passage it says, but they laid no hand on the plunder.
Yep. That seems like an important thing. Like when you see repeated phrases, right?
Yeah. So we'll look at, it's so cool when you start seeing, why would the writer make that an important detail to put into the account?
Yeah, there's some things that you say, maybe this is the link, and some things you're like, no, this is so obviously the link.
Yeah.
Let's keep going. Wally, if you'll do verses 11 through 19.
11 through 19. That very day, the number of those killed in Susa, the citadel, was reported to the king. And the king said to Queen Esther, in Susa, the citadel, the Jews have killed and destroyed 500 men, and also the 10 sons of Haman. What then have they done in the rest of the king's provinces? Now what is your wish? It shall be granted to you. And what further is your request? It shall be fulfilled. And Esther said, if it please the king, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed tomorrow to do according to this day's edict. Let the 10 sons of Haman be hanged on the gallows. And the king commanded this to be done. A decree was issued in Susa, and the 10 sons of Haman were hanged. The Jews who were in Susa gathered also on the 14th day of the month of Adar, and they killed 300 men in Susa, but they laid no hands on the plunder. Now the rest of the Jews in the king's provinces were also gathered to defend their lives, and they got relief from their enemies and killed 75,000 of those who hated them, but they laid no hands on the plunder. This was on the 13th day of the month of Adar, and the 14th day they rested and made that a day of feasting and gladness. But the Jews who were in Susa gathered on the 13th day and on the 14th and rested on the 15th day, making that day of feasting and gladness. Therefore, the Jews of the villages who lived in the rural towns hold the 14th day of the month of Adar as a day for gladness and feasting, as a holiday, and as a day on which they send gifts of food to one another.
All right. Again, we have more of the what looks like vengeance. I know some commentators look at Esther going, hey, just give me one more day of violence, like as being a little bit over the top. And I think it's interesting when you look at the commentators, the Christian commentators are actually harsher on Esther than most Jewish commentators I've noticed. Just take it as a matter of fact. Like they don't necessarily say right or wrong. They're like, this just sort of is. But I'm curious, like, how do you take that Esther asked for another day and, then you have all these crazy numbers that the author made up.
Oh my gosh.
75,000, which, I mean, that's a big number. Is that a real number? Is that a symbolic number to say a lot?
500, 700, I guess, in just one city.
500 and 300, 800.
Yeah.
I was off. I'm a
Susa.
math major. But,
That's your dialogue on nation and state differences there.
Exactly.
Political science.
but like 801 city, I mean, it stands to reason in 127 provinces. You're going to have a heck of a lot more than that. So
Yeah. So it's a lot of people. And I guess my question, though, is like, why does Esther go a step further and say, like, we need another day to like wipe out more people?
Well, evidently it was warranted in the Susa, because it's only in Susa that she asked for this extra day, right?
Correct.
This is not in the rest of the
so
provinces.
How else would you tell the rest of the provinces?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's not like it's getting out in a day.
Yeah.
You just put it on the web
So-
real fast, just like,
So the assumption to the reader is that all the cessation of violence has ceased in all other parts of the kingdom except for Susa.
There's some other threat.
There's
that's
something
been
going
aroused,
on.
yeah.
I don't know how she knew that, other than maybe divine providence or divine revelation. Say, and here we've sort of been talking about this and alluding to this. So the king comes. Does the Esther come to the king, or king come to Esther?
King said to Esther.
Yep.
It doesn't say who. Hey, your boys have killed 500.
Not your voice.
What's happening in the rest of the provinces? How many else have they killed? And then he says, what is your request? And what does he leave out this time?
Up to half my kingdom.
Right.
He's going,
anything else, Esther?
what else do you want from me? I mean, isn't that sort of the attitude that we see from...
Well, I'm kind of surprised that he asked again. Like, she doesn't approach him. He approaches her, and he's like, what else do you want? Like, there's going to be something else than, the violence that's happened here. So give me something else, girl.
And I wonder if he's also reading the tea leaves, because he is not a powerful king and everyone else is like in fear of the Jews. I mean, I just wonder if like part of him's like looking around going, I need to be on the right side of the fear,
Because it doesn't say there's the fear of Ahasuerus, right?
Right.
Mhm.
No.
It's right.
Fear
it's-
of Mordecai.
The fame and fear of Mordecai is what's increasing in the kingdom, right?
So even though positionally he's not above the king, you almost wonder if people are perceiving him as being, hey, this guy may be the king, but this guy is the king.
This guy
right?
holds the power.
Yeah.
Like you said last week, he has the auto pen.
Yeah. Literally.
Literally, he has the auto pen on his finger. So I think it's very interesting that we see a king that maybe is looking to cater to Esther instead of Esther catering to the king here, right? Because he's asking, what else? What do we need to do to end this? You tell me what I need to do.
It's
Yeah.
almost like another reversal.
Right? Right?
It's almost like a theme. Things coming up. Yeah. I love that.
Is there anything strange about her request, though? Is there anything that just doesn't make
You
sense?
think there is? So
Yeah, I do.
What's up?
Yeah. Jonathan would be like, go tell someone.
Well, it says, let the Jews who are in Susa be allowed to do what they did yesterday,
Mm-hmm.
And then it says, what about the 10 sons of Haman?
Hang him on the gallows.
Kill them again.
Gotta impale him.
Right?
Yes, I know. That's why some people believe that this chapter was composed from two different sources, but I think you have a better suggestion than that.
I do. I think it's a political sign, right? Who's really in charge? We've killed them once. Now we're going to show everybody what happens to those people that go against Mordecai and the Jews.
So you don't think it's a recapitulation of verse 10. You think it's like almost a, hey, they're already dead and we're going to hang them again?
Yes.
Interesting.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. It's a political sign. This is what happens to those people who go against the Jews. I think it's
And it
Yeah,
does
it's
work.
smart
It does
politically.
work. Because
Politically,
it doesn't say that they killed him.
No.
It says the bodies of Haman's 10 sons be
That's right.
hung.
that's right.
So it's just about showing that,
Yeah.
showing
Yeah. I think she's very shrewd.
The king's coming to her. Hey, this is all. I heard that all these people are dead. Like, what do you want? And she's like, well, let's keep going because there's
Yep.
still a threat. And also, can we hang the bodies of Haman's sons? Because we want everyone to know that this is don't do it.
Yeah.
Esther's not a timid person. Is she?
No.
She's like, I just need two things: more killing, and can we display the bodies of Haman like Game of Thrones style, so that everybody freaks out.
Progression from chapter 2.
Yeah,
Like-
I'm gonna hide my identity. I'm gonna lay low.
Like Samwise Gamgee and the arc that he has in the Lord of the Rings kind of thing.
Totally. All right, well, let's move on. Riley, if you'll do verses.
And
Go ahead.
2 more times we see they took no plunder. They took no plunder.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Mhm.
Why is that
3
important?
times now.
Why is that important?
Gonna guess it has something to do with King Saul in
Right?
1
You
Samuel
want to
15.
share?
Yeah, I mean, like his order was to take no plunder, right, and to eliminate every bloodline, and he literally did the opposite of that. And so here we see the opposite. This time they're going to destroy all the way through to the bloodline, but then take no plunder, even though the edict
I was going to say, right?
said we can take all the plunder we want. So lots of reversals here.
So instead of obeying the law that was sent down by supposedly the king, it's important for us to follow God's command that was given hundreds of years prior to this command that's been given to us now.
Exactly. And that's where, if you'll remember, we talked about how the edict was pretty much a mirror of the first edict on purpose, using right down to the same language, including that as well. So good stuff. All right. Where are we at? We're at verse 20?
20.
Mhm.
Yeah, let's do verses 20 through 29.
Then Mordecai recorded these events, and he sent letters to all the Jews who were in the provinces of King Ahasuerus, both near and far, obliging them to celebrate the 14th day of the month Adar and the 15th day of the same month annually, because on those days the Jews rid themselves of their enemies, and it was a month which was turned for them from sorrow into gladness, and from mourning into a holiday, that they should make them days of feasting and rejoicing, and sending portions of food to one another and gifts to the poor. Thus the Jews undertook what they had started to do, and what Mordecai had written to them. For Haman the son of Hammedatha, the Agagite, the adversary of all the Jews, had schemed against the Jews to destroy them, and had cast Pur, that is the lot, to disturb them and destroy them. But when it came to the king's attention, he commanded by letter that this wicked scheme which he had devised against the Jews should return on his own head, and that he and his son should be hanged on the gallows. Therefore they called these days Purim, after the name of Pur. And because the instructions in this letter, both what they had seen in this regard and what had happened to them, the Jews established and made a custom for themselves and for their descendants and for all those who allied themselves with them, so that they would not fail to celebrate these 2 days according to their regulation and according to their appointed time annually. So these days were to be remembered and celebrated throughout every generation, every family, every province, and every city, and these days of Purim were not to fail from among the Jews, or their memory fade from their descendants. Then Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, with Mordecai the Jew, wrote with full authority to confirm the second letter about Purim.
All right. A lot in there. It's interesting. So after all the violence, it's like now it's party time, basically.
It's like the end of the Phantom Menace where they're doing the big party.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. Which I think.
Or the real movie, Return of the Jedi.
That's
After
they
the
have the big
destruction
like celebration parade
Yeah.
there too, right?
Yeah.
It's incredibly campy and amazing. It's so good. So yeah, anything here? I mean, we've talked a little bit before about the name Purim and the irony of it. I guess the reversal of like we're going to call this holiday, we're going to call it die or dice. You know, this idea of casting lots and luck, which is so funny because you read the book of Esther and you see that actually everything that looks like chance is actually not chance, right? It's you're meant to see God like all throughout it. But I believe there's another connection that you mentioned as well, Wally, about it kind of has a double meaning. You want to talk a little bit about that?
The word where we get the word poor in
P-U-R. Yeah, the Hebrew word.
The Hebrew word actually means, well, in the Aramaic and other translations, it's understood as lots or dice. The Rabbi, Dr. David Verholman, mentions in his book on Esther that here in chapter 9, we have 14 occurrences of the root word for affirm, K-Y-M, and the root word for poor, P-U-R, in chapter 9. So you have
14 times.
14 times.
One chapter.
That one chapter, you have 7 occurrences of affirm, K-Y-M, and you have 7 occurrences of the root for poor, P-U-R, 7. And it's not an accident that the number is 7, right?
Right.
Right. So if we had this connection back to Numbers chapter 30 about the oath that a woman takes if she's married, if the husband remains silent, He can at the day and the moment that he hears it, he can either affirm,
Right.
he can either say, yes, this is good and she should go along with it, or he can annul it immediately. But if he remains silent, then it is affirmation and it falls on you now.
Right.
All the penalties and things that go along with this oath is now falling on you. And so what Rabbi David Foreman says, that the Pur here in chapter 9 and maybe the whole book of Esther is not necessarily the dice that Haman throws to be able to figure out what day he's going to, but the Pur to annul this decree is actually the Pur of Esther.
Which I think it's an amazing thing to do. The fact that it's a double meaning makes it so rich. And it's also interesting to me that by law, it's actually a man's job, right, to annul. And it was very specific, although that word can also mean woman or wife, I think.
Yes.
Is that correct? The original law.
Mhm.
And this is it's one of the rare times, I think maybe there may be another exception to this, that a woman is said to confirm a law in the Bible. And so again, like talking about a reversal, the author here is going, hey, Esther is standing up and doing what our culture typically thought a man was going to do. Esther stood up and actually confirmed that, which is one of the 7 times it's mentioned that we'll get to in a second. So I think that's an amazing, amazing little connection. Anything else in that one before we close out the verses?
No, I got it.
All right, let's bring it home. Starting verse 29, I'm going to go through the chapter 10 only has 3 verses, so I'll read that as well. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai the Jew, wrote the second letter with full authority to confirm the letter about Purim. He sent letters with assurances of peace and security to all the Jews who were in the 127 provinces of the kingdom in order to confirm these days of Purim at their proper time, just as Mordecai the Jew and Esther the queen had established them, and just as they had committed themselves and their descendants to the practices of fasting and lamentation. So Esther's command confirmed these customs of Purim, which were then written into the record. King Ahasuerus imposed a tax throughout the land, even to the farthest shores. All of its powerful and magnificent accomplishments and the detailed account of Mordecai's great rank with which the king had honored him had not been written in the book of the historical events of the kings of Media and Persia. Mordecai the Jew was second only to King Ahasuerus. He was famous among the Jews and highly esteemed by many of his relatives. He continued to pursue prosperity for his people and to speak for the well-being of all his descendants. All right, that is the scroll of Esther, and it ends just kind of like on this like little, almost feels like little footnotes, like an epilogue. Like, hey, by the way, everything went great.
Mordecai's doing good now.
Yeah, Mordecai's doing good. King Ahasuerus is on a Persia first, like sort of like campaign right now. Things are going great.
Isn't it interesting that the book doesn't the last part of the book, other than a little bit of power, latter part of chapter 9, the closing of the book doesn't even mention Esther. It mentions Mordecai.
Yeah, a lot of folks are not happy with it.
Right. It talks about the elevation of Mordecai and not the role or elevation of what Esther did.
Well, where else was Esther going to go? I mean, I'm just thinking out loud, like, what else could Esther have done?
Why not celebrate Esther? She's the one that protected the people by risking her own life to go into the king's presence.
Well, yes, but I mean, it's not like the status quo for her was going to change a whole lot. She's queen of Persia. She stays queen. She can't be elevated from queen.
The book is named Esther.
Yeah, but
I think the ending would have something to do with Esther was held in honor among her people.
So it does kind of have a couple things
fair.
though. Look at verse 29. Queen Esther, daughter of Abihail, along with Mordecai, wrote the second letter with full authority. That gives weight to Queen Esther. And then verse 32. So Esther's command, we already talked about this, confirm these customs of Purim. Well, confirming a law, that's the normal role of a man, not of a woman.
But like, those movies, like after the final scene cups, they blank the screen and they give like these little paragraphs about what happens to the characters after the movie.
Legally Blonde.
Yeah.
That's the one I was thinking.
Why did it did that for Mordecai? It didn't do that for Esther.
I mean, yeah, I wish they did it for Esther, but like.
So, I just find it interesting.
I do too. And there's a lot of talk about that. Like
the Purim, when they're reading these scriptures in connection with the feast, it's all about Mordecai, not about Esther.
Right. Yeah. And yet, like you said, it's still called, even in Jewish circles, the scroll of Esther.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So there is a recognition that Esther is kind of the main
And
character.
Mordecai is second in command of all the kingdom. He's only under the king. And so maybe it's like, hey, I just want to throw it back to Joseph one last time. Let's give it to Mordecai again.
Which I think uses the exact same phrase and wording, again, going back to the Joseph story. Yeah. Anything else there? The only other thing I find very interesting, and I'd like to hear your take on it. Purim, what people have noticed about it is it's the most secular religious holiday by far. In other words, like there is nothing overtly religious about Purim. I mean, like it's a lot of drinking. It's a lot of laughter. It's a lot of celebration. It's a lot of like Saturday Night Live type sketches where they're reenacting the craziness of this story.
Sounds like a lot of potlucks are happening among the Jewish people. Right?
I mean, they're giving food to one another as we
giving
established in
food to
chapter
neighbors.
9.
That's
So
right. So,
Yeah. I like how, that even though it does feel just kind of secular on the surface, if you look at it, it's a showing of celebration and thankfulness of gratitude after salvation. In this case, it's like physical salvation, like literally they were saved. But I think it is instructional for us that there's this rhythm of when God saves, that his people should remember, like by instituting Purim, it's this built-in remembrance. I think one of the most repeated Hebrew words in the entire Hebrew scriptures is zakar, which is to remember. And that's because God knows that we're forgetful. And so he is constantly putting things in like this. And what better way to remember than to literally have kids dress up in costumes and reenact this?
Well, I think it's very interesting that Esther and Mordecai write a second letter confirming their first letter about Purim, and that they're obligating themselves and obligating the people to this feast, not just for this generation, but for every generation to follow. I mean, that's very much like the feast that God initiated in Exodus in the law, right? That you're to remember. This is a big thing for the Jewish people even today, right?
Yeah.
So to
totally.
remember Esther and what happened in this book, and don't forget what the actions of Mordecai or Esther, or are they remembering something other than these two, but seeing God at work behind this situation to show himself to be sovereign Lord and keeping his promises that he made to his people and to Abraham back in Genesis chapter 12.
So good. Riley, anything else?
that's all my thoughts.
Yeah. I think the only other thing I think we did not talk about, which I think is kind of interesting, is that, well, you did talk about the fact that they were giving to other people in chapter 9, but Purim has all these things of partying and joy and happiness, and also giving gifts to the poor. This idea of like generosity being a part of it, I think is really key. And I think instructive, because whatever we think about the violence, it doesn't seem like Purim is about basking in like revenge and like hating your enemy. It seems like it's about joy, thankfulness, gratitude of a God that delivered. And by the way, that means that like as God has blessed us, we're going to bless other people that don't have what we have.
Well, the grace that God has given them to protect them, to save them, is what should be displayed among the people themselves. The edict wasn't just against the rich and those that had stuff.
Right.
It's against every one of them. So even the rich now get to give back to the poor who were affected by the edict just as much as they were. So
Love it. Love it. Well, that's the scroll of Esther. I think a whole other episode to unpack, because we should talk about, hey, what's the big so what? Like what are we to make of Esther? What is the point of it? And that's going to summarize and kind of bring everything to an end. And so hope you'll join us for that one. We will see you next week, everyone. Have a great one. Take care.